Welcome to Talk Music Talk with Boyce. I'm your host, Boyce. This is a music show where I will be featuring interviews with musicians, authors, journalists, and whoever else somehow connected to music for an hour or so of conversation. On this episode, I interviewed Susan Fast. She is a professor in Canada, and her book that we'll be discussing is Michael Jackson's Dangerous. That's in the 33 and Third series of books where an author will discuss for 130 pages about a particular album, and she happened to choose Michael Jackson's Dangerous. We had a wonderful discussion about the book, and I actually discovered it by accident, did not know about it. I was browsing around on Amazon and happened to see the book, Googled her, found out that she was going to be in Brooklyn doing a reading where the show is recorded, well, actually in New York City. Went to met her, and she was just absolutely lovely. The conversation was wonderful. Hope you enjoyed, and stick around after the interview where I'll be discussing Coda, and Coda is just some last-minute information about the show. Again, this is my interview with Susan Fast. First thing is, what exactly, you're a musicologist, right?
I am a musicologist, yeah.
And so exactly what is a musicologist? Is it different from a critic? Is it similar?
It's a kind of criticism, yeah. I guess if you're called a musicologist, it means that you've done a lot of academic training. And so a lot of what musicologists used to do is music history. And it used to be classical music history that was really valued by musicologists. And then kind of starting in the 1990s, a lot of us started working on popular music. We'd grown up with popular music, and we loved it, and we thought it was really worthy of study. So we kind of started bringing the study of popular music into academia, into the university setting. Okay. And I guess the other thing that musicologists do that might separate us from other kinds of critics is that we're trained to talk about musical sound.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. So we're not only interested in talking about the lyrics of a song or artist biography or that kind of stuff, but we also are interested in analyzing the sounds of the music. And for some of us, like me, I'm interested in talking about what that sound means socially and culturally.
Yes. Which you do in the book, which is great.
Yeah.
Which is the 100th volume of the 33 and Third series. So for Michael Jackson's Dangerous. So how did you decide that you were going to come about this book? There's many albums you could have wrote about. What made you decide on this book, and were you a fan previously?
Loved this album for a long, long time, and I came back to it after Michael's death in 2009. Like a lot of people at that time, I came back to his work. In fact, I came back to it in a way that I hadn't ever given it that kind of attention before. I mean, I knew his work. I taught Thriller in my pop music classes, but I had never really gone through his entire output and really studied it. And after he died, I just kind of lost myself in music. Like a lot of people had that reaction, right?
Yeah, definitely. Same here.
And and then I started looking around to see what had been written on Michael's work, and it was really pretty much pathetic.
Yeah, it is. Why do you think that is?
Sorry?
Why do you think that is?
That is a really good question, Boyce. I think that the media painted him in a particular kind of way, like really sensationalized the things about his life. And I think after a while, it was really difficult to get away from that kind of dialogue and have a dialogue about his music and his work.
Yes.
I think sometimes also, and I think later on in his life, in the 90s and in the 2000s, we kind of, well, not we, a lot of people thought his best work was behind him by then. And, obviously, if you've read my book, you know that I disagree with that.
Yes, I would agree with you. I've been saying that for years, that it was probably his most underrated album.
Yeah, Dangerous, really. And I think also he was such a commercial artist, and sometimes we have difficulty writing serious work on really, really super mainstream commercial art.
Yes.
There's just this idea that their work isn't, I don't know, that there isn't as much to say about it, that it's so easily accessible by everyone, and, what's there to say?
Yeah, definitely. Because I was thinking as I was reading the book, too, that with Madonna, he was a huge force during the same period. There's very little serious, work written about her either.
Yeah, although there's more serious work about Madonna, interestingly, and I think maybe part of the reason that's the case is that, unlike Michael Jackson, Madonna's politics were so very often on the surface of her work.
Yes, that's true.
Easily graspable. And also, she talked about her work. She gave interviews. She explained what she was doing. She really got out there. Whereas Michael rarely did that. And in fact, when he did give interviews, he didn't necessarily explain things. I don't think he was really interested in explaining.
Yeah.
I think he thought, I'm putting stuff out there, you guys figure it out.
That's a great way. Yeah, I actually like that idea. Just sort of let the art speak for itself. So I guess getting into the book, okay, so Dangerous came out in 91. What was he entering to when he was making the album? So 4 years earlier, Bad It came out. So what was he facing? What was going on in his life during that period to inspire Dangerous? Sort of just setting up.
What was going on in his life?
Yeah, just in terms of what was the inspiration behind it? Because I guess some artists, being a musician to myself, is that the next album is sort of informed by the previous album or everything that's happened before that, in between albums. So I guess a sense of what was going on, in terms of inspiration. How did he come up with the concept for the album? Because you do call it a concept album.
I do, but he never called it a concept album.
Because he didn't speak about it.
Idea. And, honestly, because he said so little about his work, I don't know what his inspirations were for this album or why exactly he wanted to go in this direction.
Yeah.
Why didn't he want to continue to work with Quincy Jones, for example? I'm assuming that he really wanted to start a new chapter musically. And so, he didn't really need to say that. He just did it.
Just did it. So maybe I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I was just going to say that, this is the album where he, for the first time, embraces hip-hop influences. And, so that's kind of a new direction. He's working with Teddy Riley, so he's bringing hip-hop via New Jack Swing into the mix on this album. I think he, beyond wanting to go in a new direction, and wanting to explore more overtly political themes than I think he had before. And get a bit heavier lyrically than he had before. Although certainly, there were instances of that before. Philosophical or heavy kind of lyrical ideas enter his work in really interesting ways previous to this, so even in Wanna Be Starting Something.
Yes.
There's the stuff, about having children, and if you can't feed your baby, don't have a baby.
Yeah, yes.
And Man in the Mirror, which is certainly a deeply kind of reflective lyric. But I think on Dangerous, it just gets sustained in a way that it hasn't before.
Okay. So what was the musical landscape that he was coming back into? Because 4 years is a long time. I mean, even now, 4 years is a long time. Because this is what Nirvana came out that year. You mentioned in the book, U2's Octoon Baby, it came out. So what was he coming into that in 91 musically?
That year was an incredible year for pop music. Really and truly, Nirvana's Nevermind, U2's Octoon Baby, Michael's Dangerous, a lot of other albums as well, landmark albums in a lot of different genres. And I think certainly the musical landscape had changed quite significantly from even the late 1980s. And Nirvana's Nevermind took Michael off the top of the charts, right?
Yes, I remember that.
It took Dangerous off the top of the charts, and the grunge sound and aesthetic was so pervasive in the early 90s and was viewed as, a kind of return to guitar-based rock music. And there didn't seem to be room for the kind of more pop influence work that Michael had been producing in the 1980s. The thing is that Dangerous is not really a pop album, I don't think.
How so?
I know the criticism was leveled against him that he had fallen out of touch musically with the times and and all of that, but I just don't know how you can listen to Dangerous and come to that conclusion because it's drawing on a lot of the contemporary sonic landscape, including all the industrial sounds and even compared to Teddy Riley's other earlier New Jack Swing kind of music, if you put Dangerous next to that stuff, Dangerous is a lot heavier, a lot noisier.
Yeah, it is. It feels more complex.
Really industrial sounding. So I don't think he had fallen out of step. I think he was still really pushing musical boundaries.
Okay, yeah, I would agree too. But I remember being in college and Nirvana's album came out. It really was. I was living in the dorm and you could just hear, throughout the dorm, you would hear Nirvana, which was different. You didn't walk through the dorms and hear Michael Jackson. So I don't know why that, unfortunately. So maybe speak about how you view this album as a concept album and talk about that a little.
Yeah, I think it's loosely a concept album. And so I think he's, how I've grouped the songs, and I think song grouping is really an important feature of this record. It's like he to explore a particular theme from a number of different angles. So you get groups of songs that explore the idea of romantic love, of lust, of sexual desire. You get a group of songs that explores spirituality and issues relating to the spirit and the soul. So that's kind of an interesting idea, I think. And how I view the kind of narrative arc of this record is that he starts with two songs, Jam and Why You Want to Trip on Me, which kind of talk about the state of the world in very general and broad kind of terms. And my take, both lyrically and musically, on these songs is that he's worried about the state of the world. He thinks it's, he's concerned. And then he pulls back from that kind of wide lens view. And he explores love and desire in the next four songs after that. And he explores these things from a number of different angles and in different ways.
That's starting with In the Closet, right? Yeah.
Starting with In the Closet, which is really about a kind of illicit love affair lyrically. It's Willa Stillwater who runs the blog Dancing with the Elephant, which is a great blog if you're interested.
Yeah, I read your interview, one of your interviews on there.
Yeah, that blog is published every 2 weeks, and there are always fantastic conversations about Michael Jackson's art on that blog. Really terrific analysis. And Willa noticed about the short film for In the Closet that Michael is actually wearing a wedding ring in that video.
Okay, I missed that, yeah.
And this is kind of significant because, A, he wasn't married at that time, and B, he didn't wear jewelry like that. And so this tiny detail tells us something about how we're supposed to understand, at least when we watch the video, how we're supposed to understand the narrative of this song, which is potentially that it's an adulterous affair.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. In the Closet explores sexual desire from that perspective. Remember the Time explores it from, a more kind of romantic perspective. But I think what's interesting about these songs is that, Can't Let Her Get Away and She Drives Me Wild, the other two songs in here, are also pretty gritty songs about lust.
Yeah.
And this is, we've had some of this from Michael Jackson before, but I would argue not like this. He's really into it. And he's really into exploring it from a number of different angles, as I said. And I think this is pretty new from him. This kind of sustained exploration of sexual desire and lust. And so we get this kind of narrative arc, and then, so by the time you've got the first 6 songs on the album done, that's half an hour of music. And these are all Teddy Riley produced songs.
Yes.
They're really funky and gritty and industrial sounding. And then in the middle of the album, you get Heal the World, which is so stylistically different. And I think Michael wanted to use Heal the World as a kind of pivot point in the narrative of the album. So moving from this exploration kind of large-scale world politics, and then the politics of lust and desire and love, and then moving from that into the exploration of utopia, and I would say also dystopia, especially racial dystopia, and in Black or White, where he explores racial politics, and then moving from that into 3 songs that are really just full of despair. So I think that's the kind of narrative arc of the album.
Okay.
That it starts with worry about the world. It explores kind of personal relationships, and then it moves into a whole darker. It's kind of, I guess, as though through the exploration of those intimate relationships, he comes out of that exploration kind of defeated.
Yeah. I always felt with this album that with this many songs, because even really this album came out during the CD age, so when everybody was making these really long albums, that this was something that would work on vinyl better, where you would have that break in between and you could really see the themes. So I think,
where would the break come?
Yeah, I don't know. So that's the thing too. It's like it maybe have to be a triple album.
Maybe.
Yes, they should listen to you and reissuing the vinyl. I don't even think did it ever come out on vinyl? I'm not sure.
I think it did come out on vinyl, but it was. I think he was really kind of exploiting the possibilities of the new CD form. Stretching it to its full, what is it, 80 minutes or something?
Yeah, because you remember everybody was doing that all of a sudden, which is interesting to me because it shows how the technology can dictate how much music you have and how that affects the artist. So, with vinyl, 40 minutes is, the perfect sound, around the perfect length of time for an album. And then now that's nearly doubled. So everybody was pretty much releasing what would be a double album in the 90s. So I wanted to ask you about that cluster of songs. I think some of the reviews was that second half of the album, they had too many similar sounding songs all grouped together. How do you feel about that?
Starting with Who Is It?
Yeah, and probably Given to Me, Will You Be There? No.
Yeah, I think Who Is It, Given to Me, and Will You Be There, and Keep the Faith as well. Although Keep the Faith is relatively optimistic. But those 3 songs, Who Is It, Given to Me, and Will You Be There, I think are just a really profound exploration of spiritual matters, of the soul, of feeling really alone and abandoned and betrayed, and trying to figure out what redemption might look like.
Yeah.
And that might seem like a weird kind of analysis because on the surface, Who Is It and Given to Me are kind of conventional love songs. They can certainly be read in that way. And when you look at the videos, that's the narrative you get in Who Is It in the video is certainly about a man who's been betrayed by a woman. So I think they can be read in these conventional ways, but I think if you take these 3 songs together, you can. I think they can be thematically expanded, and I kind of, in thinking about this, took my cue, maybe weirdly, from something Bono said about his when he's writing lyrics in U2, which is that often when he's talking about she, he's referring to the Holy Spirit.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, so that, there's a broader kind of, I think, much more interesting way of, of thinking about these lyrics.
Mm-hmm. Well, that would sort of, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, and I was just gonna, say, so for example, in Who Is It? I mean, it really is a song about betrayal, right?
Yeah.
And if you read the word she in that song as something larger than just a woman,
Mm-hmm.
A larger idea around spirit, around your faith in humanity, around hopefulness, all of those kinds of things, then I think really the lyric can be read in that way.
Okay, great. So would you say, because prior to the album, he was getting connected with Deepak Chopra, which you mentioned in the book, he was really getting more in touch with his spirituality, I guess, and maybe in a different way from Jehovah's Witness. And
yeah.
So these songs are a possible reflection of that. So.
Well, I don't, I do make that connection in the book,
Mm-hmm.
that, he certainly knew Deepak Chopra, and Deepak Chopra has in interviews alluded to his relationship with Michael Jackson as kind of a spiritual advisor, or lots of times just as a friend.
Mm-hmm.
I think we don't know very much about Michael Jackson's spiritual life. I mean, we certainly know about his upbringing as a Jehovah's Witness, which his mother still is.
Mm-hmm.
And, beyond that, it's not really clear. There's evidence, though, that he was very interested in lots of different spiritual traditions, that he probably read widely
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of different spiritual traditions. But, he was so quiet about these things, right? He just didn't talk about this stuff. And so it really needs to be pieced together. And I think some people are just starting to work on this.
Okay. So do you think... Good.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay. So with this album being dark and dense, do you think these songs about spiritual feel spiritual? Where was the escapism and the magic that Michael Jackson often talked about? Or maybe that was in there in that fact that he didn't talk about his work that much.
Sorry, do I think that's in the album?
Yeah, where's because that was always his sort of his things that, that you can escape with music and magic, everything was magic.
Yeah. He was big into talking about, the importance of escaping the everyday hardships through music, absolutely. And it being magical and all that kind of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I think his later work is difficult around that question.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually questionable. Well, okay, I think that you can always go to a Michael Jackson song or a Michael Jackson video, and you can understand it on a very superficial and simplistic kind of level.
Mm-hmm.
I think this was part of his genius, that he could create music and dances and music videos that were immediately graspable and immediately graspable to a large audience, including kids. His appeal crossed generations in a way that not many artists can do.
Yeah. Because I can't think of... Sorry? Okay. Yeah. I was going to say, I can't think of many artists who... I mean, it really was like all backgrounds, ages, like somehow connected to him. That many artists, that no matter how, there's many famous artists, but they didn't connect to such a wide swath of people.
That's right. Yeah. So it's immediately graspable, and in that way, yes, you can watch a short film or you can listen to a song and you can escape. Awesome. But if you start to listen to the music more deeply, or you start to watch those short films over and over again, when you start to try to unpack the layers of meaning that are there, there is a lot there. There is a depth there that I think a lot of people miss. Or, as I said in the book, I think you might intuitively know that there's a lot going on in this music, but it's difficult sometimes to get underneath the surface and really try to articulate what it is that the deeper messages of the songs. So there are a number of different ways that you can approach his music. So yeah, you can put on Jam and dance around the room, right? It's amazing groove. It's just beautiful. And you can put on the video and you can see the kids dancing and making music and Michael Jackson and Michael Jordan dancing, and it's just great. But I think underneath the surface of that, there is a lot of other stuff that's going on, and it's worth kind of mining that. I think he was, and especially in his later work, I would say he really, his music was quite message driven. And Dangerous is one thing, but on History and Invincible, and a little bit on Blood on the Dance Floor, he had gotten quite angry.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely reflected in that music. I mean, it's hard to put on the song "They Don't Really Care About Us" without hearing that anger.
Yeah, definitely.
And without understanding that, that is a serious lyric about racial inequality.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's something that's throughout the book. Because, I found interesting is that, when Dangerous came out, there was always the thing like, he was getting wider and wider, not just in terms of his looks, but everything else. But it seemed like with this album, he was actually embracing, African American culture more with the Remember the Time video. And, and even choosing, Teddy Riley. I mean, that was the most urban music you could get during that period.
Absolutely, yeah. And this is one of the points that I try to make that people really missed, I think, about Michael Jackson, because they weren't listening carefully to what he was doing anymore in his music. So I think, the public, a lot of people in the public just saw his skin getting lighter, and I'm sure now, that the autopsy revealed that he did in fact have vitiligo.
Yeah.
In his interview with Oprah Winfrey in 1993, although he was quite tentative about it in that interview. And he didn't talk about this a lot. And I think actually he made the decision that he was going to use this as a way to get people to talk about race.
Oh, okay.
What does it mean to be an African American man? Is it about skin color?
Because he's black regardless of his skin. That was the thing. He's black regardless of his skin color.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And he acknowledged that. He said in a great 2005 radio interview with Jesse Jackson, which is available on the internet, he said to Jesse Jackson, "I am a proud black man." And that wasn't the first time he had said that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he was really challenging ideas, I think both about race and gender, right, in the way that he presented himself. He was asking us to think about, what does masculinity look like? What does blackness look like? And, he could have come out, without his makeup on.
Yeah.
And said, "Look, I have vitiligo. This is what it looks like. Please understand me," right? He chose not to do that. And in a way, that would be a very easy thing to do, right? Rather than saying, "Oh, no, I think I'm going to use this to challenge our perceptions." And why do people need to explain how they look?
Yeah, it's a very personal...
It's a very personal thing, right? Yeah. So, and then the absolutely what you just said, Boyce, he starts to work with people like Teddy Riley. Right up until his death, he was working with, top-of-the-line black urban music people, right? I make the argument that in these later albums in the 90s, his music really sounds much less mainstream pop and much more R&B. And so, if you want to make an argument around him, disregarding or not embracing his African Americanness, I think that's a difficult argument to make.
Yeah. So do you think that during this period, from Dangerous on, that he was still continually embraced by a black audience as opposed to, or at least in America, in a way that, say, a white audience wasn't embracing him?
I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think he was. Did you ever see when he performs Remember the Time on the Soul Train Awards?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, when he's sitting down, you could just feel the love, and you still would feel that, say, in the black community, that there still was a love for Michael Jackson. It was like, oh, well, whatever about the skin color, but there was allegations and all that there was still a maybe embracing that you didn't necessarily feel safe from white community.
Yeah.
And I think maybe in Europe, because Black and White was his big, was internationally, wasn't this his second biggest album, Dangerous? In Europe? Yeah, something like that. So, because I was thinking about at your book reading, remember the one guy, he was sitting behind me and he asked, was your book a corrective? Because there was a consensus about Michael Jackson. And I was like, well, no, not necessarily consensus, or it depends who you're talking about the consensus is coming from. So I don't know if you want to speak about that in terms of blacks and whites, or American versus Europe, how he was perceived differently.
Yeah, I think there's no question that he was received differently in North America, and maybe there's even a distinction between Canada and the United States.
Okay. Where you're located.
I'm located in Canada. I think the way that, the whole history of racial politics in the United States situates him in a very particular kind of discussion and narrative about race in the context of the United States, which is different from other parts of the world. And I think similarly, the allegations of child abuse, I think all of that was seen in a much different light in Europe, certainly, and probably other parts of the world. I think there needs to be some more research done about that, because I have anecdotal evidence around that.
Okay.
Comments people have made, someone in Europe saying to me, "What was the big deal?" And there is this whole kind of puritanical tradition around sex and sexuality in North America. Is different, and there's such fear around men and children.
Yeah.
But in terms of what kind of statements can we make about the way he's received in different parts of the world, somebody's got to do a project on that.
Yes. That could be your next project, Susan. Would you write anything, books on Invincible and history of the rest of his work? Does that interest you?
I don't know that I'm done writing on Michael Jackson. Really and truly, there's a lot more to say. I don't know if I would tackle another album in that way. I think there are other people, Joe Vogel, who wrote Man in the Music.
Yes, it's a great book.
Yeah, terrific book. I know that he's written a little bit about history. He's written about Earth Song for sure, and I think Joe, you should do a book on history.
Yeah.
But I think his later work needs attention.
So, what was the work that went into writing this book, like preparing for it, research and?
Well, I did not. I didn't do interviews with people. I tried to reach out to a few people who I thought might be interesting to talk to, but I didn't get interviews with them.
Yeah.
Partly I didn't concentrate on that so much because Joe Vogel has done that work.
Yes.
If you go read Man in the Music, he's interviewed all the people. He's interviewed Teddy Riley and
Bill Bottrell.
a lot of the people who have worked on these albums with Michael. So my focus was more on trying to do some musical analysis to take apart the songs and figure out how they are working structurally and everything, and to talk about that in relation to larger cultural ideas.
Okay.
And so that's the kind of work that I do. So thinking through the big concept of postmodernism in the early 90s, that was a really big kind of idea that was being written about by a lot of different people. And so one of the things I do in my first chapter is to put Jam, especially that song, into the context of these debates and arguments around postmodernism.
Okay.
I think actually Michael is riffing on, I think part of his angst in that song is about what's come to be called the postmodern condition.
Okay.
And then in the songs about lust and desire and everything, I talk about issues of sexuality and gender and how Michael presented himself. Talk about his way of being masculine. So yeah.
Okay, great. So I was what was I going to ask you about? Oh, so I wanted to know, like, particularly, you maybe finishing up with this, about trickster and dandyism, since you mentioned about masculinity. You mentioned that Michael was a trickster and dandy, and how does that fit in with him? With Trickster and Dandyism.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I think it's interesting to think about Michael as a dandy, which, in some ways it's a bit of a stretch, and in other ways it isn't. But I had just read a fantastic book on Black Dandyism, which is still, I think it came out in 2009, and the author, whose name is just escaping me at the moment, she traces the history both through Africa into the United States, into Britain, of Black Dandyism. And as I was reading that, I was thinking so much about Michael Jackson and how, the idea, so dandyism is really first and foremost the idea that someone who has no power or who has very little power appropriates the style, including the clothing, of people who do have power.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, and so it's kind of secondarily about sexuality and masculinity and stuff, and it's really in the first instance it's about power. And I just started thinking about the ways in which Michael presented himself in his military jacket, and also I would say, and always in this finery, right? He
Yes.
always looked so decked out.
This is true.
And dandyism is also about decking yourself out in the trappings of power, but taking it way over the top as well, which Michael Jackson absolutely did.
Yes.
Right? And I just think about him sometimes, like some of the images we have that, I suppose at the time they were also striking images, but now looking back on them, like when he went to the White House, I think in 1984 when Reagan was president, and he's standing next to the President of the United States in this, I think it's a blue
with like
jacket
with the sash.
And he kept his sunglasses on, and he's got his glove on, and he looks like he's the one who has power.
He's very regal.
And so, and the thing that's also interesting about Michael Jackson, and anyway, there's a long tradition, even, in the history of slavery in the United States around appropriating power through clothing, through the use of style and clothing. And the interesting thing about Michael Jackson is that, and I think what scared people about him eventually, is that he was not only, dressing up, right, and appropriating power through style that way. He had power.
Yes.
And I think actually part of the problem became that he had way too much power because he was so commercially successful.
Yeah, it became frightening.
And had such influence in the music industry for so long.
So how has things changed since his death? And the perception of him.
Do you mean in terms of how he's viewed?
Yeah, it's how he's perceived, like the way, because like pretty much like the last 15 years in some ways he had become a joke, but I remember the week he died, you could not walk without hearing his music blasting from cars and buildings. It's everyone was, and everybody was talking about it. And it seemed like things have been brought back to the music, which is what I like about your book.
Yeah, I think that's really true. I think there are still crazy stories that go on about him.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if, I mean, perception has shifted. For some people, it's shifted a lot. For other people, I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
You know, I still hear from people, when I say I've written a book on Michael Jackson, I sometimes still get the standard lines.
Yes.
Know, oh, what a freak he was.
Yeah.
Or, so I don't know. I mean, one of the things that I wanted to try to do with this book was to bring the conversation back to his music, but also to try to talk about why by the early 90s he was, you know, I really do think that by this time he was perceived as a threat.
Mm-hmm.
Partly because he had a lot of power in the music industry, partly because I think he really presented himself to the world as an adult on this record.
Yeah. For the first time, pretty much, yeah.
Pardon me?
And for the first time, because Off the Wall was seen as, say, one chapter as adult, but this was something new.
I think
and on his own.
Something new, and I think the sort of sexualized way in which he presented himself was, you know, I think this, so now we've got Michael Jackson, who we could always kind of perceive as this youthful, young, you know, little boy. Nostalgically, we can think back to him as a little boy and innocent and a good boy.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's presenting himself in this, you know, really kind of adult, sexualized way. I mean, not that he hadn't done this before, certainly in his live shows. But yeah, here he was, you know, making videos like in the closet and stuff. And I think that a lot of critics did not get it.
No.
And did not believe it, and still don't believe it. You know, like it's like, oh, really? You know, he was faking it or whatever. But I think they're kind of, you know, I think there was a feeling that he had to be taken down.
Mm-hmm. But you could definitely feel that with the court case. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, you really have to ask yourself, based on the terrible and shoddy evidence, both around the 1993 allegations and the 2003 allegations. Like, you know, in other circumstances, I don't think anything would have happened.
No, I don't either.
Around those things, but the viciousness with which Tom Smith went after him was, I mean, it was just unprecedented. It was, you know, other people have said this, it was like a lynching.
Yeah, it was like it was personal.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Susan, I'm glad you wrote this book to bring it back to the music. And I hope that continues with Michael Jackson. Yeah. So he's a great artist, and I just hope it continues where people just keep focusing on the music, because that was what he wanted. I think he would want people to do, you know, and the magic and escapism of it all.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed our conversation.
I did too.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for inviting me.
Sure.
To do your podcast, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, and I will be in touch with you. And that was my interview with Dr. Susan Fast discussing her book in the 33 Third series, Michael Jackson's Dangerous. I hope you enjoyed the interview. You can find Susan on Twitter at SusanFast3. That's the number 3. At SusanFast3 on Twitter. Make sure you check out the Talk Music Talk website, which is talkmusictalk.com. diasporic.com. That's nice and simple. And my call to action here on Coda is follow me on Instagram at This Is Boyce. That's Instagram at This Is Boyce. Boyce is spelled B-O-I-C-E. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Make sure you come back again for another episode of Talk Music Talk. And this one's for you, Liz.